I'm joined by my Locked On colleague and also my friend, Gil Martin from the Locked On Islanders podcast. Gil, how you doing? And I hear the Islanders are acquiring Elias Pettersson.
Well, there are rumors that there may be interest. Let's put it that way. You're probably jumping ahead 2 or 3 spots in what has to happen to make that statement, but you never know, right?
You never know, and it's obviously been a bit of a crazy time in Canuck land with rumors seemingly swirling out of control. And from my perspective, and I've said this on the show, and every dayers know, the fact that every single team in the NHL, more or less, is chatting about what it would take to get Elias Pettersson tells you that trading him is probably a bad idea. But Gil, from the Islanders' perspective, obviously your team is kind of stuck in that mushy middle. Is there a sentiment in the fan base that Pettersson could help take this team to another level?
Yeah, I think there is. I mean, look, the Islanders need more goal scoring. They, have not been in the top half of the league in goal scoring in, many seasons. They're 27th right now. Getting somebody who could help the power play, who could provide some offense, and who is defensively responsible is really positive. And the other thing, the Islanders have so many older players. This is a team that wants to retool, not rebuild, and get younger, faster, and more skilled. And Pettersson would certainly, check all those boxes at this point.
Yeah, he would. He's younger than about 15 of the Islanders players there. I haven't done the math on it, but that's not what it feels like. So, I did listen to your episode, Gil, about what it would take for the Islanders to land Pettersson. For our listeners here on Lockdown, go check that out if you want the full Islanders take on that. But for myself, Gil, when I look at this Islanders roster, there's really 2 players on the roster to me that stand out, and one is pretty obvious. It's Noah Dobson. And again, the Canucks do have a desperate need for another top 4 right shot defenseman. They would also have a pretty desperate need for a centerman if they trade Elias Pettersson. And the guy that makes the most sense is Matt Barzal. And look, I know I think it's fantasy land. I think that you're trading Pettersson for Dobson and Barzal, but maybe just give me a bit of insight from your end about what's gone on with both those players this season, because they both seem to be having down years.
Yeah, well, Barzal's been dealing with injuries. So he missed 20-something games, and that really hurt. And he's just starting to get back to his, playing shape, and his timing is coming back. So, the numbers may not be where they normally are, but injuries have certainly played a big role in that, and I'm not overly worried. Barzal is in his prime. One of the better skaters in the league, can turn on a dime, really knows how to skate on his edges and just hold on to the puck. Maybe the big criticism you have of him offensively is he holds on to the puck a little too long and doesn't shoot enough. So, he'll fake out 3 guys, and then the 4th guy will force him to cough up the puck, and, it goes back the other way. Whereas you would prefer that he would do those dynamic things with the puck and it would lead to an offensive opportunity, whether it be for him or one of his teammates. So when he's on, that's what happens. He'll skate around, he'll create time and space, he'll pass the puck, and you'll get a one-timer from Bo Horvat, and set up a really good scoring opportunity. When he's off, he holds onto the puck and then coughs it up, and it's a turnover, and all of a sudden everybody's desperately trying to get back and prevent an odd man rush in the other direction.
Right. And in terms of Barzal, I mean, he is listed as a center, but he does largely play the wing with the Islanders. In your opinion, does he look better on the wing, or is that just due to the fact that there's, don't want to say a plethora of talented centers in New York, but you got Nelson, you got Horvat. I'm definitely missing another guy or 2 in there, but there's Jean-Gabriel Pageau would be the other one.
Right, Pageau and Kyle McLean. There's a glut of centers or people who can play center on the Islanders roster. I think the weakness Barzal has as a center, more than anything, he's not great in the faceoff dot. So even if he's playing center, you would want like a winger who can take draws. Anders Lee used to take draws for him when Anders Lee was on his wing. So that is sort of part of the reason. And I think the other thing is that I think he plays a little better on the wing because it forces him to be a little more disciplined positionally. but he can create more at center because he can move to either side and evade opposing defenders. So, at this point in his career, he's young, he's talented. I think he can play either position and be just fine.
Yeah, and so far in his career, he's averaged 21 goals and 72 points per 82 games. So he's been a pretty damn good NHL player. In the faceoff, Doc Gill, as you're mentioning, hovering around that 43% mark, which ironically, Elias Pettersson was also around until last season when he started winning. He won more than half of his draws for the first time in his career. Pettersson is down to 45% this season, but make no doubt about it, based on the defensive profile, he's definitely a center in the NHL. Now, the other, I think, main roster player that could potentially come back in a trade for Elias Pettersson would be Noah Dobson. So, Gil, give us the rundown on Noah Dobson and specifically what the hell has gone on with him this year?
Yeah, he has struggled this year. He had a breakout year last year, 70 points. But even last year, I think he had like 68 or 69 points with 10 games left. And he just sort of, his play cratered the last 8 to 10 games of the season for whatever reason. Maybe he was tired. Maybe he was playing hurt. I don't know. This year, offensively, I mean, obviously, when you don't have Matthew Barzal, when you don't have Anthony Duclair, you're missing a couple of defense players also. So he's playing extra minutes. I think that has negatively impacted his productivity. But defensively this year, he has just been bad. I mean, there's no way around it. He has coughed up the puck far too often in his own zone. He doesn't have he has maybe average hockey sense, where if it was anything better than that, he could be like a perennial all-star kind of defenseman. But, he doesn't really see the ice as well as you would like him to see it.
Yeah, and in terms of, those decision making, he's obviously playing, I imagine, some tougher matchups on the Islanders. You tell me, is he kind of taking on the toughest matchups every night? And who has he played with as his partner?
He has predominantly played with Alexander Romanov. When Romanov is healthy, it's been a good pair. But Patrick Roy kind of likes to mix and match. And when your team is struggling, you mix and match even more. So he's played with a lot of different partners, depending on who's healthy, who's available. But you really want to pair Dobson with somebody who is responsible defensively and maybe a little bit more physical, because Dobson, again, can get caught out of position, doesn't always pick up his man. I don't want to even count how many times Dobson and whoever his partner was on a given shift both ended up behind the net trying to chase the puck and left a player unattended for an easy tap in front. So defensively, when he's on, he's average at best, probably a little below that. Offensively, when he's on, 70 points last year. I mean, he can really be impressive, passing the puck, distributing the puck, and setting up his teammates.
Yeah, and hopefully Patrick Levine's not listening to this episode, because, I think one of the biggest struggles with the Canucks right now, of course, they need more puck movers and guys that can skate on the back end. So Dobson fits the bill there. But I don't think they need another guy with a below average hockey sense. But let's make it clear, Noah Dobson is not Tyler Myers. He's not Vincent Desharnais.
No.
He's not Derek Forbort. He's a much better hockey player than that. Now, Gil, let's get to the juicy stuff here, okay? So in terms of either your opinion or stuff you've read out there in terms of Islanders reporters, what do you think is the best and most realistic package to get Elias Pettersson? And I'll follow that up by saying, maybe what's the most ridiculous trade proposal you've heard, maybe among your commenters and listeners, or maybe
there's a lot of competition for the ridiculous one. I got comments on my YouTube page from both Islander fans and Canucks fans, and I couldn't even finish some of those comments because it was like, oh yeah, give us Pettersson for a bag of pucks, or we want all the best players on the Islanders and a first round draft pick, and maybe we'll give you Pettersson. So. Both fan bases obviously are, looking at this through rose-colored glasses, and that's to be expected. But to me, a realistic package instead of Matt Barzal might be Brock Nelson. And the rumors that I've heard from different sources are the Canucks like Nelson, but they don't want him as a rental. So he's an unrestricted free agent at the end of this year. They would want to be able to negotiate an extension with Nelson before pulling the trigger. And then whether it's Nelson and Dobson or Nelson and a pick, I've heard Danny Nelson, also one of the Islanders' top prospects, mentioned as a possibility. So, those are some of the combinations that I think make a little bit more sense, and whether you throw in a pick or retain partial salary on one side or the other. There's a lot of ways to make the deal fairer and make it work under the cap. But I think the Islanders are going to be reluctant to part with Matthew Barzal. And Brock Nelson has already said, hey, I want to test the free agent market. Now, again, his agent could be just saying that to try to, get the Islanders to the table. We don't know how much of that is negotiating ploys and how much of that is honestly, how Brock Nelson feels. But realistically, I think Nelson and Dobson are probably something the Islanders would be more willing to entertain, even though, again, and Dobson, by the way, is an RFA with arbitration rights. So you could sign him to a bridge deal. You could just go to arbitration, or you could sign him to that, 8-year, $8 million a year kind of a deal and lock up this guy who's 25 years old now, just turned 25 in the last couple of weeks, and have him for his entire prime.
Yeah, and Noah Dobson working with Adam Foote. I mean, Adam Foote seemed to work wonders for defensemen on the Canucks last season. Hasn't quite been the same success this season, but there's a lot of intrigue with Noah Dobson. I will say from the Brock Nelson front, I like Brock Nelson, great player. The Canucks could have the two best looking Brocks in the NHL on their team with that trade. That being said, if there is an Elias Pettersson trade that involves Brock Nelson coming the other way, I think most fans in this market are going to puke. Because then your two top centers are a 32-year-old JT Miller and a 33-year-old Brock Nelson. And I just don't see the Canucks winning the Stanley Cup that way. But we'll see what transpires. Of course, this is all just fun talk, man. We'll see what actually happens with the Pettersson situation. I mean, I'm on team keep him in Vancouver. I'm sure you're on team trade him for Brock Nelson. I understand that one. Maybe Gil, before I let you go, a couple of the Islanders' top prospects, maybe just talk about them a bit. They were on Team USA. Danny Nelson and Cole Yzerman. Like what are their trajectories looking like right now?
Yeah, I mean, I would say Danny Nelson is a year or two more away, and Cole Yzerman maybe 2 to 3 years away. Yzerman is a sniper. He is a pure goal scorer. He really looked good for Team USA at the World Juniors. He's tearing it up in college right now in Boston. But the problem is what he does when he's not shooting the puck. He's got a lot to learn about positional hockey, defensive hockey. The crazy thing is he did all that on Team USA as the 13th forward, where he only played on the power play and maybe took a handful of shifts when other guys were either tired or maybe because they were on the power play, the next shift you needed a different forward to take the spot. They love his attitude. He's willing to work. He's willing to learn, but he is a very one-dimensional player at this stage of his development. Danny Nelson, I think, is about a year ahead of him. He was a much more well-rounded player. He was an alternate captain for Team USA. And I think his overall game is just more complete, but he's certainly not the goal scorer that Cole Yzerman is or potentially could be. But those are probably two of the top 3 prospects right now in the Islanders organization. And while Lou Lamoriello does have a track record of dealing top prospects, you guys have still Aatu Räty, so Islander fans would be up in arms if either one of those guys were traded at this point.
There you go. You heard it here first from Gil Martin, Locked On Islanders host. Gil, before you go, let us know where we can find you. I tell Canucks fans, go listen to that episode for the Islanders' point of view of what it would take to get Elias Pettersson out of Vancouver. And Gil, you did a pretty good job recapping Pettersson's career. That was nice to listen to as a Canucks fan with the first few minutes there, because the guy, man, there's a lot of Pettersson in this market, but I'm a big Pettersson fan. He's done a lot for this team. And I do believe he can do a lot for this team in the playoffs in the future, but we'll see what the future holds. Gil, thanks for your time. Go plug yourself and then get out of here.
Well, you could find the Locked On Islanders podcast wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. You could follow me on X at Ice Wars NYR VSNYI. And I also host the Monday edition and co-host the Friday edition of Locked On NHL, which is where we got to know each other.
Exactly. That's Gil Martin, ladies and gentlemen.